This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
One of the most enigmatic characters in the Old Testament is a guy who literally sold his birthright for a bowl of beans. Why would he do that, and is there more to his story that hasn't been told? Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining us is a gentleman who's been diving into this subject, working on a book about this character. He is the co-host of the Dig Bible podcast, the host of the Prometheus Lens podcast. What a great name. And working on a forthcoming book called The Epic of Esau. And we welcome to the bunker for the first time, Justin Brown. Justin, good to see you, brother.
Hey, thank you for having me. Had you on our show and several times, so I appreciate you extending the invite for me to come out.
Well, no worries. And it's kind of funny. It just shows you how scatterbrained I've been of late that I thought I was on your program tonight. But actually, this works out better because this is a good subject, and you're the one who's going to have to come up with the answers here instead of me. So,
role reversal.
Yeah. So we read about Esau and his role in the, I guess you want to say, the origin story of Israel. He was the elder brother of Jacob. And yet, because of his bad decision and Jacob's, I guess, conniving nature, I mean, his name means the supplanter or the trickster, Jacob was able to convince Esau to give up his birthright as the firstborn, which then gave Jacob the family estate of his father Isaac. And so he became the son of the promise, which I'm sure, didn't take God by surprise. The Lord knew that this was going to happen all the way along. But there are some additional stories beyond what we read in Esau. I mean, we get a look at all of his descendants, a list of those in Genesis chapter 36. We know that his descendants, the nation of Edom, later a real thorn in Israel's side, and to this day, the rabbis in Israel essentially call the Gentiles the Gentile enemies of the Jews. Edomites, referring to the Roman Catholic Church. What more is there that we can learn about Esau?
Well, with me, it was an accident. I was actually with Trey Smith from God in the Nutshell, and we were talking to him on the Dig Bible podcast, and my buddy Steve has always been a Bigfoot enthusiast. And, I mean, I knew the stories of Bigfoot, but I never really took any kind of deep dive on it. But Trey had made a comment and said, "Oh, well, you're from Tennessee. That's Bigfoot country, right? Maybe we'll get together and go Bigfoot hunting sometime." And then it was out of nowhere. It just kind of hit me. I was like, Genesis 25:25, Esau. So I made like a little joke, just being catty. And I said, well, maybe Genesis 25:25, Esau. Maybe that was the first Bigfoot. And we just kind of laughed, and laughed it off. But as I got to studying the Epic of Gilgamesh and then looking into the book of Jasher and just some of these other books, it started mentioning Esau, and just it kind of painted this more broad picture for me. It sent me on this journey of discovery of Esau now. And I will go out and say, that I look at what Scripture says, but then I look at these other books, these extra biblical books, just to kind of fill in gaps, so to speak. As long as, my opinion is, it doesn't have to be canonical to have cultural facts and contexts and oral traditions and things like that. So basically, this whole book is me looking through these other writings and traditions and just trying to piece together from those a complete story of Esau.
So, and just for people who are wondering, Genesis 25:25 is the description of Esau as he was born. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Esau, Esau meaning red. And anyone who's ever been to southwest Jordan, especially the Wadi Rum, which we've been to a couple of times now on our Israel tours, you can see why they named the land red, because, well, that's why they set the movie The Martian there, because you didn't have to color correct, the sand. It looks like the surface of Mars. What are some of the additional stories that these extra biblical texts give us about Esau?
Well, before we go there, Derek, I was wanting to go to some of the, because I know you're all about going into the meanings of the Hebrew, and there's all kinds of little nuggets in there. But in Genesis 25, verse 23, it says, the Lord said that 2 nations were in her womb, and 2 peoples from within her shall be divided, and one shall be stronger than the other, but the older shall serve the younger.
Right.
And you'd mentioned this in the beginning. This is complete opposite, of the traditions back then. The eldest got the birthright. The eldest, or the youngest served the eldest. So this was a kind of an inversion of what the cultural norm was. So that stood out. But when you look in the lexicon for the word stronger, it says that Hebrew is yamas, in which it means, stout. So he was stouter. And as I was looking through some of these other texts and other epics and things, this word stout pops up again. But I thought that was worth mentioning because it comes into play later. But when you get into the book of Jasher, specifically, it talks about that he was out in the field and he was hunting. And then it mentions Nimrod. And it says Nimrod was also in the field with his mighty men, and they were hunting, and that he looked upon Esau with jealousy. And the way it worded it was kind of like he was hunting Esau. And it says that Esau spotted him, and that as they split up, but Nimrod was left with 2 of his mighty men. And this word mighty comes back to, Gibor, which was a word that was described the Nephilim giants, the Gibborim.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well, here's this hairy, quote-unquote, man in the woods, and here's Nimrod, who was compared to a Gibborim with 2 more Gibborim men, out in the woods hunting for Esau. And it says that he spots them and he hides himself. But then he sneaks up and murders Nimrod and his 2 Gibborim. So I was like, well, here's this hairy man that kills not 1, not 2, but 3 Gibborim single-handedly in combat. And he cuts off Nimrod's head. But then as the other men heard the screams come running, he stops and takes the time to remove his garments. And it says he takes off back home and bumps into his brother Jacob. And here's where it ties into the bowl of soup trading. And to me, when I read this, I was like, this makes so much more sense. And I'm of the opinion, when we read the book in Genesis, some of the things that they talk about, like the giants and the trading of this birthright, was just briefly mentioned because they didn't want to metaphorically beat a dead horse. This was already well known to the people that was reading this text through oral tradition or texts, so they didn't feel the need to go into great detail. But in this story, it says that he comes in on his deathbed. So, he just battled these 3 Gibborim, probably, had some really bad wounds, about to die. And his brother Jacob offers him food. And that's why in Genesis, when we read, it just says that he comes in from the field exhausted. And then he trades his birthright for the soup. And then you see the anticipation, the excitement of Jacob. He's like, promise me now that you will do this thing. So it was like there's some urgency there. So if we go by the book of Jasher, it's because he was about to die. And he even says in Genesis, what use is a birthright to me? Take it. I'm about to die. So I thought that was very interesting how that book of Jasher has the same account in Genesis, but with some more detail. And then, so I asked myself, so what's so great about these garments and this birthright? Well, later when you get into the book of Jasher, it mentions these garments. And it says that these were basically the garments that were given to Adam and Eve, and that they passed down through the lineage to the chosen child, the birthright. So that's what this birthright was referring to according to the book of Jasher. But then, of course, the first question you ask yourself, oh, I'm sorry.
So preserved through the Noah and his sons on the ark, and then obviously taken by Ham through Cush to Nimrod.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was like, well, how did Nimrod wind up with these things? So then we read, it says that Ham, in his going out, stole the garments. And then when you go back and read that account, and a lot of people miss out on this, but when you read the account where Noah gets drunk on his wine and passes out naked, it says that, Ham basically saw him and he was punished and said that cursed would be Cain and he would serve his brothers. And growing up, I was like, man, that's pretty harsh.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was like, I try to put myself in that position. It's like if my dad passed out drunk and I happened to walk in and see him, that's not my fault. That's his fault.
Yeah.
But then when I got to looking into the words and the culture and what those phrases mean.
You realize from the book of Leviticus, it doesn't mean he just happened to see his dad with no clothes on. It means he probably engaged in an incestuous act with Noah's wife. Whether that was Ham's mother or not, we don't know. But it sounds disgusting to us today. But there are other examples of that in the Bible. Reuben did that to Jacob with his concubine Bilhah. Absalom did it to David. Yeah. It's like a dog marking his territory. Look, I'm the man. The old man can't stop me. So that was just a thing back in the ancient world.
And that's what, once I found that out, though, I was like, well, that makes perfect sense, because that was an act of dominance. You were trying to take over the household. So the cursing was exact opposite of what he wanted.
Right.
You will serve instead of being served. But then I was like, well, how come he didn't get cursed? It says, cursed be Canaan. Canaan was his firstborn son. And according to, if you read it chronologically, hadn't even been born yet. So then I got to thinking, I was like, well, could it be that maybe once he awakened from his drunkenness, as it says, it doesn't say the next day. This could be a few months down the road after he, decides to quit drinking or whatever. So then my mind was thinking, it's like, well, what if it was 9 months later and he sees that his wife is now pregnant and just delivered a son that he realizes is not his. Mm-hmm. And they named it Canaan. So he said, cursed be Canaan.
Entirely possible. I mean, the story's not clear, but what was clear was that Ham was trying to take over the world. Basically, he and his two brothers were going to divide the world between the three of them, and Ham was trying to claim the family estate from Noah by doing what he did. Again, Reuben tried the same thing with Jacob, Absalom with David, and it didn't work out well for either one of them either. There are a lot of you can dive into a lot of the history of Edom and the relations with Edom and the Israelites later on. There are numerous accounts of wars between Israel and Edom in the Old Testament, prophecies of their destruction for helping when the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem, for example, under Nebuchadnezzar. But there is more in the Old Testament than we think, and some of these extra biblical accounts are similar to accounts we see elsewhere. For example, the Armenians have an origin story where they're the founder of the Armenian nation called Haik they credit him with killing Nimrod in battle. That Nimrod had come from Babylon to bring the people of Armenia, or the people of Haik, back to Babel, And maybe this is, I don't know, a memory of what happened with the nations after the languages got confused at Babel. But it's interesting that there are other stories out there. Sort of like, you know, George Washington slept here. Everyone wants to claim that, yeah, it was our ancestor is the one who took down Nimrod or whatever. It is interesting, though, that while Esau and Jacob seem to leave each other on pretty good terms. I mean, after Jacob came back after serving his father-in-law Laban for 20 years, and Esau met him and seemed to be happy to meet him. Jacob still didn't trust him, and obviously relations between Israel and Esau, Jacob's descendants and Esau's descendants, didn't go well. I mean, how did you think those might have shaped the stories in texts like the Book of Jasher and some of the rabbinical commentaries?
To tell you the truth, it was like I when I read that, I often thought that, because when you read the Book of Jasher too, it also mentions, you know, it says that that he was a conniving and deceitful, you know, planning man, and it even uses that word, you know, crafty, the same that it uses the Nakash. And I thought that was, you know, maybe he was just trying to play nice so he could get back at his brother. And I'm sure that was in the back of Jacob's mind because he was so paranoid.
And clearly Esau did not please his parents, Isaac and Rebekah, because Esau took wives from among the Canaanites, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, Basemath, the daughter of Ishmael. So these were all not from the family other than Ishmael, who would have been sort of a, you know, shirt-tail cousin, I suppose. But it seems that Esau was not really one who thought through his responsibilities very clearly, was ruled by his passions. I mean, that he let his stomach do the thinking for him in the issue of his birthright.
Which I always interpreted was like it was a purpose rebellion. You know, if like the modern day preacher's kid. You know, they know what they're supposed to do. They know what's expected of them. So what do? They do the exact opposite just to bring shame upon their parents or you know, a negative attention. It's just like a very open rebellion, and it's a conscious rebellion. Because one thing that I've discovered, and like I said, I will come out and say, you know, this is just opinion and interpretation, but when it goes back to those garments, you know, this garment was the birthright, and it passed down through the lineages, and that was his to have. But he obviously, you know, either didn't want it or got tricked out of it, and then he was bitter about it. But when you read into some of these different books and texts, when you read about the serpent in the garden with the Nakash, and I've talked to Dr. Judd about this, and you know, he said, of course, you know, this is just interpretation, and there's lots of things and correlations that can point to this direction and make this a theory, but you know, this, we can't prove this. But I find it very interesting, and it ties into this story and my theory perfectly, because the Nakash, you know, was the shining one, you know, the one who practices divination. You know, I learned all that through, you know, Dr. Michael Heiser and his work. And basically the way the theory goes was like, you know, when the Nakash rebelled, he was like the high priest of heaven. And it says in Ezekiel 28, every precious stone was your covering. And it had all these gold inlays. Of course, you know, if you imagine this, you know, and it's basically the ephod.
Right, especially when you look at the Septuagint translation, you've got all 12 stones of the ephod in there, the high priest's garments. So yeah.
Yeah. So he's bright and he's shining, and then it says that, you know, that a garment was given to Adam and Eve. So what if this garment was the stripping of the Nakash? He lost his priestly role, and it was given to mankind, to Adam and Eve. And if you see, when Adam comes out of the garden, he makes a sacrifice, So he is the, first king and priest, of earth. So here was this prideful entity that we know as Satan, the Nakash. If he was the high priest of heaven, very proud man and full of pomp, went to try to deceive God's creation and bring them low. But once again, it's flipped. He's the one brought low. He's the one that is stripped of his position, and he's stripped of his garments. So now what was once something he wore as a status symbol and wore with pride is now the reminder of his shame as he sees it on the one that he tried to deceive. That alone would make Satan hate you. So as this thing passes down, it's basically the way I seen it was, that was the birthright, was the priesthood, the representation, of God on earth as the priestly role. And, and a lot of Jewish traditions talk about, this thing might have had, supernatural, abilities and characteristics attached to it. And some people even say, like the book of Jasher, it says about these garments that when Nimrod put them on, that he became Gibborim, that he put this on at 20 years old, at coming of age. And even the book of Jasher, when it describes Esau removing them from him, it says that he took the garments because of these garments he was able to rule over all the nations. So it's like it gave credit to these garments for Nimrod's status.
The question I would have here, and we can talk a little bit about the book of Jasher and why it's not in the Bible, but why would God allow something like this? I mean, that's the question that comes to my mind. Why would God allow essentially a magic garment out there, which seems to circumvent his purposes? I mean, wouldn't he have a different plan? I mean, why would there be something like this out there? And I guess that leads to the next story. The next question, which is, why would this story come to be? Okay, if it's just a legend or a myth that is not really rooted in complete truth, historically true, why would it come to be? Why would the rabbis, presumably responsible for this story developing over the centuries, why would they go there? Why would they assume that God would even allow something like this?
Now, whether this was a physical garment with supernatural abilities, now that's something that I personally don't align with. I was, when we're talking about that, I was just saying that's the Jewish context. That's what they believe. That was the oral traditions. Now, I do believe there might have been an actual garment or some kind of, birthright, some kind of heirloom that was passed down through the lineages and maybe was stolen because they, maybe some people believe there was some kind of supernatural thing, or ability attached to it. And of course, just as all oral traditions and myths, the more they're told, the more they get stretched and kind of blown up a little bit, and this would be a good way to kind of explain Nimrod's greatness and then also really magnify him bigger than life. Of course, I mean, if you were someone powerful and you're writing your histories down or starting stories about yourself, if you're 6 foot tall, you're going to make yourself 10 foot tall. You know what I mean? You're going to make yourself look as close to God's status as you can, especially back then, because you see through the Sumerian kings lists and the documentations, if this king he killed 1,000 men by his sword, well, the next one, he ironically killed 2,000. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did an interview with Dr. Craig Olson last year about that, who's written a book, How Old Was Father Abraham? And he points out that in the ancient Near East, they didn't have the same conception of history that we have. History were the stories you told to honor your ancestors, honor the fathers. And so when the Bible tells us Abraham lived to be 175 years old, it didn't really mean he lived to be 175. They just ascribed to him that number to give him honor Now, could it be? Yeah, okay. I just look at the ancient Near East and the fact that we've got a lot of ancient texts, and I know this is going to generate some pushback. Just we know that the Bible uses numbers symbolically. 70 doesn't always mean 7 times 10. It means all of them, the complete set, not one left out, that kind of thing. And the same was done with ages, and the same was done with deeds of the ancestors. The Bible was not written according to modern standards of historical scholarship, just as other texts in the ancient Near East weren't written that way. And looking at all the texts that we have from the cultures around ancient Israel, Ammon, Moab, the Canaanites, Egypt, Babylon, different city-states in Syria, and not one of them says, hey, you ever notice how those Hebrews lived to be like 150, 175 years old? There's nothing like that. Now, I'm not trying to say the Bible isn't true. It is true. We just have to understand that the stories in it were not told for the purposes of documenting precision history as we understand it. The sequence of events described in it fit with the archaeological record. I'm not contesting that the Bible is the divinely inspired Word of God. Please, please, please understand that. What I'm saying is, if we try to read the Bible as history, this is where you get problems with skeptics saying, I can't believe that. No way Abraham lived to be 175. That's not what the author meant. No way Joseph lived to be 110. That's not what the author meant. That's not what Moses meant when he wrote those numbers down. He was ascribing great honor to these ancestors. And we could be seeing the same thing here, maybe for different purposes, with the story of Esau.
Oh, and I totally agree. And that's the thing is, that's one thing that Mike really talked about, Mike Heiser, that really changed how I read my Bible, was we try to read an ancient text with modern eyes and modern interpretations. Right. And we're always going to fall short. Now, when we do that, yeah, we can pull some meanings from it that apply today. But it was written to a certain people, certain group, in a certain time. So if we're not familiar with that group, that time, that people, their culture, their innuendos, their coins of phrases, their thought beliefs, their epics, their stories, all of these things shape those people and who they are, and it shapes how they tell stories and how they relate certain things. And we use symbology and coin of phrases and things today. Guaranteed, if somebody found a journal entry from somebody of modern day 1,000 years from now, and so, let's say it was some girl's journal, some teenage girl talking about Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber is so hot. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I can see him now, 1,000 years from now. He must have had the plague, or he died of some kind of disease. It talks about his temperature of his body.
Yeah. And again, in the Old Testament, we see this, and not just in the Old Testament, but in the ancient Near East. You mentioned the Sumerian kings list and the claims that the earliest kings of Sumer lived to be thousands, tens of thousands of years old, which is even more difficult to accept than, say, 500, 700, 900 years old. Again, could that be possible in the pre-flood era especially? Yeah, okay, I'm okay with that. But we just need to understand that sometimes the stories were told to ascribe honor, and people reading it in the day would have understood exactly what Moses meant when he wrote those things down. Today, we can accept those things as true, and I'm not arguing. Again, I believe the Bible is the divinely inspired Word of God, inerrant in the original languages. But as you say, Justin, we try to impose a 21st century worldview onto something written in the 15th century BC, we can get ourselves into trouble. And that's where you get a lot of skeptics who just, decide that the Bible is nothing but myths and fairy tales because clearly this cannot possibly be true. Well, depends on how you read it. And if you're reading it with those blinders on, you're going to wind up boxing yourself into a corner. So what was the most surprising thing that you encountered as you dug into the story of Esau and some of the extra-biblical accounts?
Well, mine was one discovery and then one hypothesis that I just kind of come up on my own was, one, when you go through the Midrash and some of the Hebrew, traditions and stuff like that, I stumbled across the story of Lamech and Cain. And that, I had never heard that. And that really, kind of grabbed my attention, especially looking at Esau and the hairy man, and things like that. Because even when you go through other cultures throughout the world, different times, you have what they call the wild man stories. These hairy men and women in the woods, and they were described what we would call today a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Midrash, I had found that when Cain received his mark, and that he would wander, and that it was basically he had become hairy, like a beast of the field. And then that kind of, for me, it tied in with King Nebuchadnezzar. His curse, he grew hair as wild as a beast and nails, and roamed with the beast of the field. So it was kind of almost like a theme cursing of God through Scripture. So then when I found this in the Midrash, it says that Lamech, of course it says, to Cain, he's worried to death that somebody's going to kill him. So I was like, well, if this oral tradition is in fact true, that would explain why he was scared to death that somebody's going to kill him, because he looks just like a wild beast of the field. But when you get into the Midrash, it says that Lamech was out hunting, and in his old age became blind. But he still wanted to hunt, so his son would lead him into the woods and guide his bow and help him hunt. Well, the way the story goes is he mistakes Cain for a wild beast of the field and kills Cain. And then once Lamech finds out, in his grief and his anger, because he was aware of the curse from God, killed his son for the mistake.
Oh, okay.
And then he comes back home, and they say this is where the Genesis story kicks in, where he says, "Cursed. If Cain was cursed this much, then I am cursed 70 times 7, because he killed the one that was cursed and not to be killed." And that, to me, like I said, that was, oral tradition, the Midrash. I ain't saying that it, historically happened, but it's very interesting, and I had never found that before. So that was really interesting to me. But the other one that I had found was, and I actually thought of you, Derek, because in our conversations, it's always stuck out to me how you talk about how we have so many similar stories throughout the world that sound so much like the biblical account and biblical stories. And in my book, I even quoted you in it and says, like my good friend Derek Gilbert says, we have the real version, they have the fake news version. And of course, with the fake news version, they'll twist it and invert it. And of course, whoever's telling the story is going to make themselves look as good as possible. But I was actually studying and getting ready to do an episode with Gary Wayne on the Epic of Gilgamesh. So I was going through and reading this and studying this and taking notes, and this was right around the same time I was studying for this topic. And as it was, and of course a lot of people equate Gilgamesh with Nimrod. And so I already had that in the back of my mind as I was reading this story. Well, then all of a sudden, it mentions this guy named Enkidu.
Mm-hmm.
And he's described as red, covered in hair from head to toe. He was a mighty hunter, just like Esau. He was a man of the field, just like Esau. And they end up having a battle with each other. And what stood out to me, how I said earlier, how Esau's name translates as, or how he was described, was Yamas, was stout. That's the very same word that's used to describe Enkidu. It says that he was Yamas, he was stout, because Gilgamesh was described as taller, but Enkidu was shorter but broader.
Mm-hmm.
But in the story, a hunter in the field sees this Enkidu and is scared to death, runs back and tells Gilgamesh, Well, Gilgamesh wants to be the mighty one. He sees this guy as a challenge to his supremacy. So he wants to take him down for all to see, but of course he's worried. He's heard the stories about this guy. He's, watched him for a while. So he takes a temple prostitute from the temple of Inanna, and sends her out and commands her to lie with him for 6 days and 7 nights, but then to withdraw herself, and that the wilderness would reject him. So the way the story goes, she does as she is told to do, withdraws herself, and sure enough, all the animals run from him.
Yeah.
He can't get close to them. No, none of them have nothing to do with him. But what I found really curious was it said it was like his body was bound by a cord. His swiftness was gone. His strength was gone. This was, in my opinion, the equivalent to, ritual sex magic and binding. So here we have Gilgamesh in this story, kind of like Samson and Delilah. You have a female coming and seducing the man and taking away his power. So here Gilgamesh was stacking the deck for the battle to come. But they end up having this epic battle. Enkidu takes Gilgamesh down to one knee, which has never been done before. And everyone watching thinks that Gilgamesh is about to lose. But last minute, he picks him up, body slams him, match is over. But they end up becoming best friends in this story. And go off and have all these adventures.
It's like a WrestleMania, WWE storyline or something.
Yeah, what you gonna do, brother?
Yeah.
But I thought it was weird because it was like, well, here we have these two guys. A lot of historians and archaeologists believe that Gilgamesh is in fact Nimrod. Here's this hairy red creature described exactly as Esau. The book of Jasher says that they met, they fought, and had battle. In this story, they meet, they have a battle, but once it's inverted, it's flipped on its head. In this one, Gilgamesh wins, and they become best friends, but it's ultimately the Enkidu that dies in the end from a curse from Inanna.
Yeah, she got upset when she was rejected by Gilgamesh, and so she sent the bull of heaven down to destroy Gilgamesh's city, and Gilgamesh and Enkidu defeat the bull of heaven. They kill it, right, and he throws one of the legs of the bull of heaven and smacks Inanna with it, and so that leads to the curse that leads to Enkidu's death. I've always wondered if there was any connection between the legs. If I remember right, I think the Epic of Gilgamesh even tells which leg, like left, rear. So anyway, but there was one of the legs of the sacrificial bulls in the Hebrew temple that was not to be eaten. And I may be conflating things here, but it just idea percolating in the back of my head. Yeah, it is. There's some very interesting aspects to that story, especially when Gilgamesh and Enkidu go to the Cedar Forest to fight the guardian of the Cedar Forest called Humbaba, because in some transliterations it's Huwawa, and the founder of Associates for Biblical Research, which is an archaeological ministry, Dr. David Livingston, suggested in an article he posted at his personal website years ago that Huwawa, what if that was a Mesopotamian memory of Yahweh? And that Yahweh was the guardian of, and this story was about Gilgamesh, Nimrod, trying to take down Yahweh. That's an interesting concept, interesting idea.
Yeah,
I don't know that there are other scholars who agree with Livingston about that, but I've cited that a couple of times in my books because it's an interesting possibility, because it's very clear in the Epic of Gilgamesh. There are different versions of it that have survived. One that was found at Nineveh. There's one that's called the Old Babylonian text, and that one specifically mentions the Forest of Lebanon. So they're placing it right at Mount Hermon.
Yes.
And then specifying that after that they penetrated the secret dwelling of the Anunnaki, which is really interesting because by that point in history, the time of the Old Babylonian period would be the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. the Anunnaki had been demoted from being the great gods of Sumer to being the judges of the netherworld. And of course, we know from
they went
Mike
from the
Heiser's,
Agigi or the Agigi to the Anunnaki.
Right. And we know from Mike Heiser's work at Reversing Hermon and the Canaanite texts that Mount Hermon overlooked the land of Bashan, which was believed to be the entrance to the underworld. So you got some very interesting connections there. If, again, the connection identifying Gilgamesh as Nimrod is accurate, you've got some very interesting links then to bringing him over to the region later occupied by the Israelites.
And another thing, too, is on the as far as the garments, I think that we see those at least 2 more times, like in canon, in the biblical text.
Really?
Because when we read about the account where Ham uncovers his father's nakedness, if you remember in that story, he comes out and talks to his brothers and tells his brothers. And it just says that the brothers, found out and that they took a garment and placed it on their back and walked backwards and covered their father's nakedness. So, with the context, of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, if in fact the father's nakedness that they were referring to was their mother, I kind of seen that as Ham comes out and is like, hey, Dad's, he's not fit to rule the family anymore. He stays drunk all the time. We need to rise and take over the family. I've just did this deed. If you guys do this too, we'll rule together, and he can't take all 3 of us. And so they took this family heirloom, this garment, and walked backwards and covered their mother and refused to do that, because it says that Ham didn't get the garments until his going out. So that would place the garments, if in fact they came through on the boat, in their possession.
Interesting that, and I just now noticed this. I don't think Sharon and I mentioned this when we went through Genesis 9 in our most recent trip through the Bible in our weekly Bible study. The ESV says Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. But the translators of the New English Translation, and I love the Net Bible because the translators make their notes available for free so you can understand why they chose to render the passage the way they did. They render it, Shem and Japheth took the garment, and they note that the Hebrew translated, the word translated garment in Hebrew has the definite article, the, attached to it. So it's not a garment, it is the garment. And they continue, indicates that the garment is definite and vivid in the mind of the narrator.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Did Ham bring it out when he told his brothers? So again, it's not a garment, it is the garment. And that is interesting. The Septuagint translation renders it also with the definite article. Shem and Japheth took the garment and lay it on their 2 backs and walked backward and covered their father's nakedness. So, interesting that the ESV and presumably other English translations replace the definite article with the indefinite article, a garment, instead of the garment. Which garment are we talking about here? Is it the garment that they preserved from Adam that eventually wound up in the hands of Nimrod and then Esau? And
then the other time was after we see, if these stories hold true, after he got them back from Nimrod and then traded them to Jacob. Well, we see later on that his favored son, Joseph, receives a coat of many colors. And like we said, Ezekiel 28 talks about all these multicolored stones, the gold inlays. This garment would, in fact, be very colorful.
That is very interesting. Some interesting speculation, interesting possibilities there. What do we take away from the story of Esau? I mean, is there a lesson for us in the 21st century from Esau, his choices, and his life?
Well, with Esau, I guess it's to me the way I always looked at it was the missed opportunity of the prodigal son. Because in the prodigal son, we see this man had the keys to the kingdom. He had everything. He trades everything away for worldly pleasures, and now couldn't wait for the payoff later. That would have been so much better and wiser decision. He wanted it now. You know, it's like the J.G. Wentworth. It's my money, and I want it now. You know, so, but he does that, and he just goes into open rebellion and refuses stubbornly to repent. Where the story of the prodigal son, he does the same thing, but he humbly sees the errors of his ways, and even speculating in his mind that he would be a peasant and he would be lucky to scrub the floors and get the scraps off the table. That would be better than where he was at, and came back to the Father. But lo and behold, he came back with open arms and welcomed back in and got everything back in his status restored. So, I mean, to me, when I read the whole story of Esau, it's just missed opportunity, and how we need to swallow our pride and admit when we're wrong, and forgiveness will be there for us.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of the lost birthright is one that resonates, especially in today's world with the transhumanist movement, where they're trying to get us to sign on to radical life extension through science. You know, we will defeat death through science, and trade the promise of a resurrection into an incorruptible body, 1 Corinthians 15, for a future where we will be enhanced and upgraded and uploaded, and where the blue screen of death could actually mean the blue screen of death. It's a similar thing. It's just sort of a high-tech version of Esau. I can't wait for that. I got to eat now, so I'm going to take this bowl of beans and give up the promise of
Amen.
Descendants as the stars of heaven that were promised to Abraham. So when do you hope to have the book out and available?
Well, right now, like I said, this is I'm a layman, and I just started writing on this thing a few months ago. But I actually wrote like 6 chapters in one sitting. So my hope is to have everything out and ready by summer, or at least finished print, and trying to figure out how to get this thing to everybody.
Yeah, there's more work to writing than people realize. I laugh when we get messages sent to us. Well, you just write because it's an easy way to make a lot of money. It's like, okay, number one, it's not easy. Number two, you don't make a lot of money at it either. So clearly this is somebody who does not have a clue. And I will take that comment in with that context in mind. So yeah, this is really interesting. Again, it goes outside of the Bible, but I think we can derive some spiritual and biblical truth from it. And I think that little verse there again in Genesis 9 verse 23, just the missing definite article just adds some interest to that verse that I'd never noticed before. Shem and Japheth took the garment. Huh.
Yeah, and the Lord works in mysterious ways. Like I said, that was just a assumption or a hunch that I had, and put me in your path and show me that there might be something there. So thank you, Derek.
Well, just I don't read or speak Hebrew, but I know enough now to
a few people who do.
Yeah, I knew people who do, and I know enough to use the search engines and start looking at commentaries and stuff to try to compensate for that. So, Justin, where do people follow the Dig Bible podcast and also Prometheus Lens?
Oh, yeah, thank you. The Dig Bible podcast is a show that actually just started off as a men's study group. I invited 15, 20 guys. We had 3 guys show up, but we just dig through the Word, and we love it. We're just, some good old boys talking out of a garage. But if you want to find us, our website is thedigbiblepodcast.com. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you can consume podcasts. And the same thing for the Prometheus Lens. That's just a solo project that I took on, and where I go into the Bible, but I look at different things that are out of the norm. Some people might even say fringe, but I mean, I look at, the Bible, I look at conspiracy theory, Bigfoot, all these, interesting subjects, but I try to filter them through the lens of the Bible. So that's what that is. But that website is PrometheusLensPodcast.com, and the same thing, YouTube and Apple and Spotify. You can find us all on those platforms.
Yes, wherever fine podcasts are sold, and we'll put links to those websites and where you can subscribe to Prometheus Lens and The Dig.
And we got a
Bible
great
podcast
intro. You might recognize the voice.
Well, he works cheap, so, it was an honor to do it, brother. Justin Brown, the forthcoming book, The Epic of Esau. Watch for it. We'll let you know when that is out and available. And, brother, look forward to talking with you again soon.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Check the notes at VFTB.net or wherever you are consuming this podcast, whether video or audio. I'll have links to Justin Brown's podcast, Prometheus Lens, and the Dig Bible podcast, both of which are highly recommended. And it may seem like a fringe topic, but, there's no topic that should be off limits, at least as far as discussion goes. There are some things that we as Christians have to kind of dismiss out of hand, but some of the stories regarding Esau is not one of them. And I think it's very interesting that to this day, the Haredim, or the ultra-Orthodox rabbis, still refer to us Gentiles as Edomites, especially the Roman Catholic Church. Edomites, in other words, descendants of Esau. So kind of worth knowing what it is they think about that particular character in biblical history. Coming up, an important announcement about our Israel tour in November, but another shorter Israel tour in early May. We'll talk about that. Got some other conferences to talk to you about, and how DEI may lead to people actually unwittingly getting ready to DIE. Bless their pointy little heads. That is ahead as A View from the Bunker continues. It's a new month, and we have a new special at the Gilbert House online store.
We have a crazy, crazy deal on all of our DVDs. They are, regardless of the retail price, they are 75% off.
We keep hearing from the kids these days that everything is going to streaming video, that DVDs are old school.
Oh, not for us.
No, we are old school. And besides, we don't trust the internet will always be there. So take advantage of this special offer. Everything from our travel documentaries. Basically follow us as we go through the Holy Land and show you the important sites at ground zero on this supernatural war, plus video teachings, presentations, and much, much more.
You know, with 75% off savings on all the DVDs, as many as you want to get, you've got the money that you saved to go out and buy a DVD player.
That's it. Take advantage of it now, online only at the Gilbert House store, gilberthouse.org/store. And thank you for your prayers and support. Driving the internet to think every Sunday night, and doing it since 2009. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net. Also, various podcatchers of sorts. Other websites, gilberthouse.org. That is our web hub. My personal website, derekpgilbert.com. On social media, X, formerly Twitter, at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert. Facebook, the page is View from the Bunker, and the new social media sites, Truth Social, Gab Me, We Get Her, at Derek P. Gilbert, Threads, at Derek Gilbert. Well, Matt Walsh, a very popular commentator, blogger, and outspoken Christian, has done us a favor by sharing with the interwebs some video that was shared with him. He shared this to his X account, and in a long thread, video footage, goes back to the days of actual film video of senior officials at the Federal Aviation Administration's Flight Operations or Flight Program Operations Division, the Flight Program Operations Division. This is responsible for all aspects of aircraft operations. And this video shows a Zoom call where these officials are workshopping ways to reduce the number of white men in aviation. There are too many of us white guys in the cockpit and designing airplanes, apparently testing airplanes, what have you. This is apparently a problem that the federal government under Joe Biden feels the need to address. They want to get more people of color, more people, more diversity, more equity, more inclusivity. What Chief Operating Officer, Acting Deputy Chief Operating Officer Angela McCullough says they need to move more workers from the ramp, in other words, baggage handlers, to the cockpit. All right, now look, we're all in favor of giving people more opportunity to advance and succeed in life. That is not a bad thing. But as the meeting goes on, McCullough declares it's important to get a little uncomfortable and complains that flight operations within the FAA is too white male dominated, and tells managers they need to talk about what the future could look like. Well, bottom line is the approach is typical of diversity, equity, and inclusivity approaches, in which they look at quotas as more important than competence. And Walsh then reveals some additional information that's been sent to him by other people. That video, by the way, from April of last year, 2 years ago, April of 2022, he was shared a source, a pilot who works at Delta, who told Walsh, and I'm quoting now from Walsh's X post, "We recently had a transgender pilot repeatedly receive negative reviews during his first-year probationary period from captains he flew with regarding attitude, CRM, and judgment. Yet the chief pilot's office, the CPO, was unwilling to address the issue. Had this not been a transgender pilot, the individual would likely not have successfully completed their probationary period." The implication being that this person was passed to check a box, a quota, or perhaps to avoid the blowback that would have come from the DEI officials inside human relations at Delta Airlines. The source also noted that Delta routinely makes exceptions for trans identifying pilots concerning grooming and behavioral standards, and internally, Delta has a very lengthy guide that is published for pilots who believe they've been wrong or born into the wrong body. This is affecting other areas of aviation, according to Walsh. Another source shared with him that he works in a field where his job is to design military systems for warfighters. And he has to deal with new hires pitching me ideas about gender-inclusive seatbelts. I mean, you're trying to design a plane that is going to effectively engage with the enemy and successfully return your pilots home safely. And you've got people on staff who are saying, we need gender-inclusive seatbelts. Again, DEI as an acronym is misspelled. It should be DIE, because that's what's going to happen if we continue to lower the meritocracy or the bar for success in order to change outcomes based on color, gender identity, or sexual orientation. That should have no bearing whatsoever when it comes to engineering or competence in the cockpit. I don't care who the pilot is, what they look like, or how they identify, or what they choose to do in the privacy of their own home with other consenting adults. But I'd like to know that the people designing, testing, and flying the planes know what they're doing. Maybe DEI is correct. We just need to change the letters it stands for: diversity, equity, idiocracy, because that's really what it is. Bless their pointy little heads. Well, we've got a number of things that we are doing here this spring and summer that are just popping up on the calendar left and right. The Skywatch TV virtual conference we've been telling you about, that is launching on February 29th. Of course, the feature attraction, I would say, maybe that's a callous way of putting it, but I think it's a very special opportunity because this will be Tom Horn's last presentation. He recorded it last fall before he took ill. And so this will be obviously something that you'll want to see. Tom Horn's last conference presentation. Mine was sent off to Matt Piscarich, God bless him, who's taking care of all of the final editing and processing on these presentations. And mine will be under the title Hamas, Molech, and Armageddon, because I think what's happening in Israel right now between Israel and Hamas is a turf war for control of the land that God declared to be his. Other presenters include Carl Gallups, Dr. Judd Burton, Ryan Pitterson. Hello, Grace. Grace, the rescue dog, jumping in here to share her opinions. Can't really pan the camera down very easily, but there, you see her nose. Anyway, that will launch on February 29th. If you register by the 15th, so this coming week, you'll save $10 with the early bird discount, normally $95. Hi, sweetie. You get $10 off, just $85 at defenderconference.com, defenderconference.com. Now, April 5th through 8th, the first weekend and second Monday in April, the first weekend, April 5, 6, 7, the Hear the Watchman Conference, Prophetic Signs in the Heavenlies at the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center in Grapevine, Texas. That's very close to the Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. Wonderful facility and a great lineup. Good friends like Paul Begley, Colonel David Giamona, Pastor Casper McLeod, David Hevner, Dave Hodges, Michael Bodea, John Moore, David Paxton. Looking forward to meeting Tov Rose, Doug Thornton, and Dr. Carrie Mayday for the first time. So quite a lineup of powerful speakers. And then if you stay through Monday, April 8th, you'll see the second Great American Eclipse. You might remember the previous one in 2017. This is part 2, 7 years later. And it will go right across Dallas. So find out more and sign up now at hearthewatchmen.com. That's hearthewatchmen.com. Now, at the end of May, we are looking at a weekend symposium at Lake Havasu, Arizona. This is being coordinated by Jonathan and Nick Goss, the Goss brothers, or the Gosslings, as they call themselves on their podcast. But I don't have confirmation on the other speakers yet. These are people you will want to hear from. But until we have confirmation and more details, I will hold off on that. But just reserve the final weekend. This will be May 31st, June 1st, May 30th through June 1st. In Lake Havasu, Arizona. So just got an email a couple of weeks ago. Are you ever coming to Arizona? The answer is, it looks like it. Yes, the end of May. July 26th and 27th. Oh, I almost skipped over. His Call Ministries in Sparta, Missouri. That's just south of Springfield. It's where we go to get our beef. I've got a neighbor just up the road from us here in rural Stone County, Missouri, and he processes the meat at a packing house there in Sparta. But we'll be at the Finley River Ranch with His Call Ministries, Sharon and me, June 21st through 23rd, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday morning. The topic that weekend, and it'll just be the two of us speaking, is The Gates of Hell, which is the subject of our forthcoming book coming out from Defender Publishing at the end of the year. More information at hiscallministries.com. Go Therefore Conference, July 26th and 27th of 2024. This will be at the Harvest Revival Center, Pastor Neil Peterson's church in Brookville, suburban Dayton, Ohio. Dr. Michael, what a lineup. Dr. Michael Lake, L.A. Marzulli, Pastor Paul Begley, Dr. Greg Reed, Dr. Judd Burton, Pastor Carl Gallups, and Sharon and me. So we are honored to just be amongst that group, and we look forward to seeing you there as well. You can register at gothereforeconference.com, and there will be streaming video on that conference, as with the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas in April, by the way. Now, our tour of Israel, I should say, which was scheduled for late March, early April, we obviously moved it back because of the ongoing hostilities in the south and the north. As I've said, some of the key sites that we want to visit in the north of Israel, like Gilgal Rephaim and Caesarea Philippi, the Grotto of Pan at the base of Mount Hermon. Off limits right now. Too dangerous. So we backed them up to November. Actually, we'd backed them up to November originally. We just made the decision this week. This is the announcement here. We made the decision to move the tour of Israel from November to next spring. In other words, we are rolling this into our Iron and Myth tour in 2025. That will be late March through early April. Dates are available on our website, gilberthouse.org, and also on our free app. Go to the calendar section on our app, and you'll get the correct dates for the 2025 tour. Pastor Doug Van Dorn, Dr. Judd Burton going with us, and we're going to see if we can get Tim Alberino, since he's missed out on the 2024 tours now, to join us in 2025 as well. And if so, that will be a tour that you will not want to miss. Now, the 1-week tour of May, we are calling this a solidarity mission to Israel. We are looking at leaving here from the United States May 6th. If you're coming from elsewhere in the world, that's fine. Arrive in Israel on May 7th. And we've had some interest expressed from elsewhere in Europe. We will be there for 1 week, visiting sites that are connected to what happened on October 7th. We will visit the site of the Nova Music Festival. We'll visit the town of Sderot in the Negev, where the police station was besieged. We will go to Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, and we will see the important sites in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem's still secure. So we will see the city of David, the old city, the tunnels, Hezekiah's tunnel underneath the old city. If the Temple Mount is accessible, this being Ramadan, we will go there. We will go to the Mount of Olives, and we will take you, when we go to the Mount of Olives, to the actual crucifixion and burial sites of Jesus, based on the research by our friend Rabbi Zev Porat. This information is still being finalized as far as the actual dates. The cost will be about $1,950 for the land package only. Transportation, airfare to and from Tel Aviv is not included, but more information is forthcoming early this coming week, and we will get that to you via video through our app on the upcoming events site on the app, and also our website, gilberthouse.org. As soon as all of that is confirmed with Lipkin Tours. Again, this is just a tour to go to Israel, to bear witness to what's happened without the filter of the corporate media in the way, and pray in these sites. And as I contend in my presentation for the forthcoming Skywatch TV virtual conference, this struggle is just an extension of the struggle in the spirit realm for control of the Holy Land. And that term is meant literally. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen, whether it's on YouTube. And if so, please subscribe, share with your friends, and then click that bell for notifications. But also guarantee that we never get canceled by downloading our free mobile app. It's available for iOS, Android, and Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. We got versions for Roku and Apple TV as well, and soon Amazon Fire TV. But the mobile app includes the calendars, and of course a section for blog articles. Every week on Wednesday we put out another article connected to the research that we've been doing for the last 7-8 years, and also a Bible with multiple translations. And now in the bottom right corner, a tab for connecting you directly to our streaming video site, where you can get access to all of our teachings, tours, and videos there. There's also the messaging section, which has really become a very important part of the app, where you can communicate, share with others, ask questions directly to me and Sharon, ask for prayer, offer prayer for others, all of that in a self-contained app. We are so blessed by the developer Subsplash, a company that does apps for many of our friends. Skywatch TV, L.A. Marzulli, Prophecy Watchers, The Jim Baker Show, all of them use Subsplash. So that is how we get the word out around the world. Take advantage of it. Please download it to your smartphone or tablet. We've got links to their app stores at gilberthouse.org/app. You'll also find a link at vftb.net. Thank you again for taking time out of your schedule. Give our Facebook page a like, and if you get a spare moment, a review at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, wherever you find this podcast, which is, of course, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Our announcer is the inimitable DC Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released on Creative Commons Attribution, not commercial, no derivatives, 4.0 international license. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. And good night, Oliver, wherever you are. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.